One day, after working at the studio, I stopped by a cafe to look through some prints. As I paid the bill, I asked the owner if he'd had any work. "Actually, I do need another waitress," he said, and asked me to come in for a trial. He offered me work over the lunch shift, between data entry at 6 a.m. in the city every morning and working at the studio in the evenings. With the new job, I enrolled in university for another year. A path was opening up. Finally, I was drawing the loose ends together. I am dressed as a bride in the foyer of a church full of people. I am about to walk down the aisle, but there is no groom waiting for me. Everyone turns to watch me walk, and I am so ashamed that I've been left I can't move. Then I see a little girl up at the end of the aisle. She is me and she looks very sad. I want to protect her, but I'm relieved that it's her up there and not me. While working at the cafe, I met a woman who worked in theatre. We discussed my writing and she was interested in working with me. She came back after my shift and I explained in detail an idea for a script, including staging and set. But over the next few days, it seemed that the entire conversation had been recorded and was being played back to me everywhere I went, as if everything I'd said was duplicated, as if on the medium mosaic, tiny squares lit up part of our conversation. So I didn't call her or return her calls again. A swift visit to a fan website, the first time in weeks, told me that Ken had just wrapped his latest film called The Sweetie. I logged off and went to bed. The next day I opened the fridge. It was usually empty, but my housemate had just been shopping there and there was a big tub of sour cream on the centre shelf. It was hard to avoid the resemblance to the title of Ken's film, like the whole experience, created in the context of such nuances. In a robotic way, I managed to rationalise it all away, successfully hiding any immediate reaction to a situation, then learning to manufacture the best one I thought would help me pass the test. I suspected then I'd been taken on as a project. I'd been working at the cafe for nearly 3 weeks. While waiting on a group seated for lunch, I spilled soup on the table while serving. The guests sighed loudly, saying something about poor service, and the whole party of lunchtime diners walked out the door. The next day, a lady slipped over on the floor beside the till. In a histrionic display, she complained that she'd broken her leg, threatening a legal suit. But after the commotion died down, she stood and walked out. I ran my hand across the concrete floor. "It's not wet. I haven't dropped any food there," I said. But my boss didn't look happy. An hour later, another man, a regular at the cafe, stuck his foot out so that I almost tripped as I walked by. I recognised him from the photography darkroom where I'd hired a lab. He'd been exposing beautiful nudes. When he stood to pay, he slipped on the floor too and fell over. He spoke to my boss for a while over the till. That afternoon, when my boss handed me the rolled cash, he offered a shorter shift working at the coffee cart about 100 metres up the street. I reluctantly started working at the cart on the early morning shift. I worked alongside another man, lean with short blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, possibly in his late 20s with an accent. European, he told me. When the morning rush was over and nobody around, he liked to play the game. Ask me the time. At first I took it as a test, but he clearly enjoyed the prospect of my question. "Okay, what's the time?" I asked. "It is," he said, looking into the sky, 12 minutes past 10. He then pulled a digital wristwatch out of his pocket and checked. "Ah, see," he said, showing me the display. "So did you look at it a minute ago?" I asked, sceptical. But over the next few days he kept up the game. "Ask me now," he'd say, and his answer was usually correct. "Why don't you just wear it?" I asked. "I don't need to," he said. "It's all up here." He tapped his temple. After another customer walked away, he said, "You don't say much, do you?" "I do when I have something to say," I said. "No, I mean you don't say much about yourself." I looked at him. "That's because it's already seeping out," I thought. "I don't need to," I replied. "Yeah," he said, nodding. "That's right. I can tell already that someone's broken your spirit." At the end of the shift, he usually paid me from a roll of notes in his pocket, but that day he told me he didn't have any money for me. "What, why not?" I asked. "The boss didn't give me money for you," he said simply. "Well, I'll go and have a chat to him," I said, walking away from the cart. When I arrived at the cafe, it was bustling with customers and my boss was rushing around. He had a new waitress taking orders, another young girl about my age. I walked behind the counter. "Why won't you pay me?" I asked him directly. "I'm all out today," he said. "Come back tomorrow, I'll pay you for today then." But the next day when I arrived at the coffee cart, I found it vandalised and the till stolen. I walked back to the cafe. "How about you take a break for a few days?" said my boss. "I really need this job," I said. He was looking at orders, but I could tell he was still thinking. "Okay, come in tomorrow." At the end of the next day I went to him to collect my pay in cash. "I'm all out today," he said. "I only have money for change." It was obvious I was not going to get any money out of him. I refused to take it personally and walked away. I had no work after leaving the cafe, but continued at university 2 nights a week, applying for permanent jobs in any field remotely linked to my previous experience and skills, getting by on basics, borrowing money from friends and family, continuing to write.